Every time I close my eyes, I see it again. The black shape among the trees. If you'd told me a year ago I'd be talking about things like this, I would have laughed. I used to roll my eyes at ghost shows. Now I sleep with the TV on, volume just loud enough to drown out a whisper I can't unhear. It started on a strangely warm Saturday in October, the kind where the air smells like dry leaves and dust, and the city seems to be holding its breath. My friend Petar and I decided to hike up Djendem Hill. Coffee in a thermos, two sweaty idiots chasing a view. Harmless. Plovdiv was shining like a toy city from up there. Every street a thin silver thread. I've always loved that place. Heavy, old, almost alive. The Turks called it Djendem Hell. My grandmother used to warn me, at night you can hear footsteps up there, but never ask who's there. When I was a kid, I laughed. Now I wouldn't dare. We sat on the rocks by the antenna. Heat shimmered. The air had that weird stillness where even the flies seemed to float instead of buzz. Petar stopped mid-sentence, squinting toward the trees. "Do you see that down there?" At first I thought it was a man. Then the not-manness of it crept over me. No clothes, no face, nothing for the light to cling to. It wasn't black like a jacket is black. It was an absence, a cutout, a hole in the day. The longer I stared, the less sure I felt of my own eyes. Then the smell hit burnt metal and rotten eggs. Petar swore. "Let's go." I meant to stand. I didn't. The thing didn't turn toward us so much as the space around it aligned, like a lens snapping into focus. The air pressed down. Birds stopped. The wind forgot how to blow. Even the city hum vanished. And then a sound. Not a voice. A whisper dragged across metal, like something trying to speak through a broken speaker. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. We'd been noticed. The next second, it was gone. Not behind a tree, not crouching, just absent, as if it had been erased. We ran. At the bottom, Petar looked colorless and old. "Don't call me," he said. "I don't want to remember this." He walked away. I stood there with our cooling thermos and the taste of metal in my mouth. The next day, I texted. No answer. 2 days later, hospital. Some kind of breakdown, someone said. His mother said he woke screaming that the black one stood by his window. She wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. After that, my night split in two. In the first part, I fell asleep pretending it was nothing. In the second part, I woke to a darkness darker than darkness. A corner of my room that refused to be just a corner. If I listened hard enough, I could hear it. A thin, metallic whisper, like breath slipping through a grate. That should have been enough to keep me away from Djendem forever. Instead, something ugly and practical took over. If I could explain it, I could survive it. That's what I told myself. I started collecting details the way you collect lint, without meaning to. Weather reports, sunset times, old maps of the hill with different names printed across the same slope. Djendem Tepe, Djendem Hell. I found a photo from the 70s. Some local hiking club, all in short shorts and long socks, grinning on the same rocks where Petar and I had sat. In the tree line behind them, there was a smudge that the eye wanted to skip. When I zoomed in, the pixels fell apart. But the shape of the absence, that stayed. I went back, in daylight, like an idiot. I told myself I was checking the route. I told myself I was bringing bread for the stray dogs that nap by the base path. Halfway up, the air changed temperature in one stride, like stepping from sun into an open fridge. The smell arrived a second later, and with it a memory of Petar's voice saying, "Let's go," that didn't sound like the way he actually talks. I realized then How memory bends to make sense of fear. Nothing happened. That was somehow worse. I left the bread on the ground. None of the dogs ate it. On my way down, an old woman with a shopping bag stood at the bus stop looking up the hill. "You went up," she said, not really asking. "Just for the view," I said. She nodded. "They always say that." I asked, "Who?" She pretended she hadn't heard. "Don't count the steps," she said, "and don't speak first." I told myself it was village superstition, nonsense that sticks to old places like cobwebs stick to rafters. That night I woke 3 times. The second time, the whisper seemed to be coming from inside the wall beside my bed. The third time, I smelled the hill in my apartment. Burnt metal, rotten eggs, old dust, all at once. On the 4th morning, I took a recorder. Not a fancy one, just the voice memo app on my phone. I left for Djendem before sunrise. The city at that hour is a dentist's waiting room. Bright and sterile and pretending to be kind. The path was lighter than the sky. The birds hadn't started yet. Up by the antenna, the rocks were cold. I held the phone and said, "I was here on Saturday. I saw something." My voice sounded like it belonged to a stranger. I stood there, counting to 60. At 37, I lost the number. That small failure felt huge, like something had been taken from me and replaced with a worse version. The wind rose and dropped, and in the drop, I thought I heard the scraping whisper. I checked the recording. The waveform was a monotonous line, but when I put the phone to my ear, there it was. Too faint, too high, threaded through with a static hiss. I wanted to go. I didn't move. I don't know when the shape appeared. It wasn't there. Then it was there, 40 meters away at the edge of the trees, exactly where the light couldn't make up its mind. My knees went soft. The smell came in waves. The space around it seemed slightly wrong, as if the hillside tilted toward it the tiniest degree. The phone in my hand got warm, then hot. A thin line appeared across the screen, like a scratch under glass. The recording time froze. When I blinked, the timer had jumped forward 6 minutes. I hadn't lived. I did the one thing my grandmother warned me never to do. I asked, "Who are you?" It wasn't curiosity. It was panic trying to put a box around a fire. The answer came like a dropped fork skittering across tile. Not a word. A refusal to be a word. I had the sensation of standing too close to a high-voltage fence. Teeth humming, fingers aching, thoughts sizzling into ozone. I don't remember leaving the rocks. I do remember reaching the base and realizing I'd carried the whisper with me like you carry a splinter. Pater's mother called that afternoon. "Stop," she said. Her voice sounded like it had aged a decade since I last heard it. "Whatever you're doing, stop." "Have you seen him?" I asked. She was quiet long enough that I thought the line had dropped. Then, "He keeps waking to look at the window. He says the black one wants to be let in. He says if he asks who it is, it will tell him his name." I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow in my apartment contained an outline that didn't belong. At 3, the whisper came back, faint, distant, as if breathed through corrugated plastic. It traveled along the wall, paused by the door, then retreated. When I stepped into the hall the next morning, the corridor smelled like burnt wires. I tried to make it small. I went to work. I answered emails. I fixed lunch. I opened maps. I read tourist blogs where people posted selfies from Djendem with captions about sunsets and beer. I looked for mentions of the black shape. I found none. I found instead the old habit the living have of sanding down the edges of the places they love. It's just a hill, people say, until it isn't. I went to see my grandmother. She never liked my apartment, said it points the wrong way, which, in her house, means the bed stares at a door. When I told her about the hill, she didn't cross herself, didn't spit, didn't tell me to stop being dramatic. She said, "We don't ask names. Names are hooks. Hooks are for pulling." "That's not an answer," I said, and immediately hated how childish I sounded. "Then don't ask the wrong questions," she said. "If you hear it, count backwards from 9 and think of a river you know. If you see it, step left 3 times without turning your back. If it follows you home, leave bread and salt at the threshold and don't look out the window until morning." I started to laugh and stopped halfway. "Bread and salt?" I said. She looked at my hands. "You're shaking," she said, like she'd been waiting to say it. "If you won't do what I said, do this. Stop going up there alone." Of course I went up there alone. Not right away. I tried to be sensible. I made rules. No more dawns. No more recordings. No more questions. The rules lasted 4 days. On the 5th, the city felt too small. The air inside my apartment had the taste of a coin. I packed the thermos again because rituals matter even when they're stupid. I told myself I was going up to say goodbye to the view. The hill was busy that day. Runners. A couple photographing a dog in a sweater. A man with a drone controller. Normality has a smell. Sunblock and cold coffee and victory cigarettes at noon. I clung to it like a lifeline. I stood on the rocks and tried to memorize the look of the city, the way the tiles on the roofs made the neighborhoods look like scales on the back of a sleeping animal. I breathed in the safe smells, pine sap, soil, smoke from somewhere far. For 20 minutes, nothing was wrong. Then the sky dimmed. Not like a cloud past the sun, but like the day lost interest in being bright. The drone came down fast and wobbly, making a sound like a fly trapped in a cup. The dog barked exactly once and lay flat, as if remembering an old order. The couple packed up with the clipped efficiency of people who cannot admit to fear. The runners were gone without ever having been there. I didn't see the shape appear. I saw instead a negative space where it must have been, a hole my attention kept falling into. The smell came last. Burnt metal. Rotten eggs. Something older under both, like stones that choose not to be stepped on. I did not ask the wrong question. I remembered the steps my grandmother gave me. I stepped left 3 times without turning my back, eyes fixed on a point to the shape's right. On the 3rd step, the ground felt farther away than it should have. The whisper skated along the inside of my skull. In it was the suggestion of a sentence that had no words I could keep. I said out loud, "Not today," because saying anything else felt like bartering. The world blinked. I was standing, then I was coughing, then I was at the base with a smear of black across my phone screen that rubbed away to nothing. I don't remember the in-between. Fear edits. On the way home, I stopped at a bakery. I bought bread and pretended it was for sandwiches. In my kitchen, I set the loaf on a plate with a glass of salt beside it. I left both by the door and felt like an idiot for 10 minutes and grateful for the next 12 hours. That night I dreamed of walking in the hill's shadow. The air hummed with a low electrical sound, like a substation you can't see. The trees leaned uphill. The path led in a circle that only made sense from above. I woke staring at the ceiling, listening for the whisper the way you listen for a kettle in another room. When it came, I counted backward from 9 and thought of the river I know best, the Maritsa sliding past the city with its old patience. The whisper faltered. It sounded briefly like breath fogging glass. Then it stepped away. A week later, I stood on my balcony with a coffee I didn't want. Plovdiv lay out there pretending to be ordinary, and Djendem sat above it pretending to be a hill. On the ridge where we had sat that first day, I saw the shape again. Smaller from this distance, yes, but undeniable, motionless, watching. I raised my phone to take a picture and lowered it again without pressing the button. Some things lose their power when named, others multiply. I don't know which kind this is. I only know what my grandmother told me. Djendem is a place with its own rules. The worst mistakes are made by people who think the rules don't apply to them. Pitar won't see me. His mother says he sleeps with the light on and keeps a chair in front of the window. She says sometimes he whispers numbers, backward very slowly, until he runs out of breath. As for me, most nights I can keep the apartment full of ordinary sounds. The kettle, the neighbor's TV, the elevator's wheeze. On the nights I can't, I leave bread and salt by the door and count rivers. When the whisper comes, I let it move along the wall like a draft I can't fix. And if I close my eyes too long, I see it. The black shape among the trees, not black like fabric, but black like missing light. The city below it forgets to hum. The air remembers a different century. Somewhere behind me, footsteps begin, and I remind myself of the only rule that has ever mattered up there. Don't ask who's there. Djendem is called Djendem for a reason.